I thought I knew my sister Sarah. We'd shared everything since childhood, secrets whispered under blankets, dreams sketched on napkins, a bond forged through years of laughter and tears. But what if I told you that the person you trusted most in the world, the one you'd practically raised since our parents passed, could look you straight in the eye and lie, not just about small things, but about a betrayal so profound it would shatter your entire world? What if that lie cost you everything you'd worked for, everything you'd dreamed of? My name is Eleanor Vance, and I'm about to tell you the story of how my life, my carefully constructed future, imploded. It began innocently enough, or so I thought, with a simple credit card statement. A piece of paper that arrived in my mailbox just like any other, but held within its innocuous folds a secret that would unravel years of trust and expose a deep, festering resentment I never knew existed. You see, for months, I'd been meticulously saving, sacrificing every extra dollar, pouring my heart and soul into planning the most incredible, once-in-a-lifetime surprise vacation for Sarah and me, a 2-week escape to the sun-drenched beaches of the Caribbean, a place we'd always dreamed of visiting together. It was going to be our tribute to Mom and Dad, a way to heal, to reconnect, to finally exhale after years of grief and responsibility. I pictured us there, laughing, swimming in turquoise waters, leaving all our worries behind. I had booked everything. The flights, the luxurious resort, even a few excursions I knew she'd adore. It was all paid for, a done deal, a shining beacon on the horizon. My secret was so close to being revealed, just 2 more weeks until I could surprise her with the tickets, watch her face light up with pure joy. That joy, that unadulterated happiness, was what I lived for. Then came the statement. My primary credit card, the one I used for all my major purchases, the one I'd been diligently paying off, showed a balance that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just high, it was maxed out. Every single penny of my available credit was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I checked my own recent purchases, replayed every transaction in my mind. Nothing. I hadn't spent anything close to that amount. This was impossible. My first thought was fraud, identity theft. My heart hammered against my ribs as I imagined the nightmare of trying to untangle that mess. But then, a chilling possibility, a whisper of a thought I immediately tried to push away, began to surface. I remembered a conversation, weeks ago, about my credit card, about Sarah needing to borrow it for an emergency online purchase when her own wasn't working. I'd given her the number, of course, without a second thought. She was my sister, my family. A knot tightened in my chest. I pulled up my online banking, scrolling through the transactions, my eyes darting across the screen. And there they were, not 1 or 2, but dozens of charges, designer clothes, high-end electronics, expensive dinners at places I'd never even heard of. Each purchase a brutal stab to my carefully constructed peace, a direct assault on the future I'd worked so hard to build. The vacation funds, my hard-earned savings, all gone, replaced by Sarah's extravagant whims. The resentment hit me first, a tidal wave of bitterness. How could she, after everything? Then came the gut-wrenching betrayal, a feeling so raw and painful it took my breath away. It wasn't just the money, it was the trust, the sacred bond we shared, shattered into a million pieces. She hadn't just maxed out my credit card, she had stolen my dreams, our dreams, right out from under me. I looked at the vacation brochures, spread out on my coffee table, vibrant pictures of white sand and clear blue water. They mocked me now. The joy I had imagined, the healing I had hoped for, evaporated, replaced by a burning desire for answers, for justice. My mind began to race, not with panic, but with a cold, calculated clarity. How could I confront her? How could I make her understand the depth of her actions? And then, a truly wicked thought began to form, a plan that would turn her world upside down, just as she had mine. I still had those vacation plans, and I was still going. But not with her. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about a betrayal so deep, It demanded a reckoning, and I knew exactly how I was going to deliver it. My name is Sarah, and my life, up until recently, felt like a perfectly orchestrated symphony. I had a demanding but fulfilling job as a marketing director for a tech startup in San Francisco, a cozy apartment with a view of the Bay Bridge, and a carefully curated life that I'd built brick by painstaking brick. I was the responsible one, the planner, the one who always had a backup plan for the backup plan. My younger sister Chloe, however, was the exact opposite. She was a whirlwind, a chaotic force of nature who lived entirely in the moment, consequences be damned. We were two sides of a very shiny, very expensive coin. Chloe was always in some kind of trouble, always needing a bailout, a loan, or just a shoulder to cry on after another one of her grand schemes inevitably imploded. I loved her, of course. She was my sister, my only sibling, but that love was often tangled with a thick knot of exasperation and a simmering resentment that I tried my best to ignore. I'd spent years bailing her out, covering her rent, paying off her parking tickets, even once rescuing her from a questionable pyramid scheme involving essential oils and positive affirmations. Each time, I'd tell myself it was the last, that she'd finally learned her lesson. Each time, I was wrong. This time, though, felt different. This time, she hadn't just made a mistake. She'd committed an act of outright betrayal that shattered the fragile trust I had painstakingly tried to rebuild between us. The discovery hit me like a physical blow, a cold, sickening punch to the gut that left me breathless and reeling. It started subtly enough, with a few unfamiliar charges on my monthly credit card statement. A small, nagging voice in the back of my mind told me to investigate, but I dismissed it as an error, a glitch in the system. After all, who would dare touch my meticulously managed finances? Then came the email from my bank, a polite but firm notification that my primary credit card, the one I used for everything from groceries to my mortgage payments, had been maxed out. Maxed out. The words swam before my eyes, blurring the edges of the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of disbelief and rising panic. I called the bank immediately, my voice tight with a fear I tried desperately to suppress. The customer service representative, her voice calm and practiced, listed off the recent transactions. The first few were small, almost innocuous, a few $100s here, a couple of hundred there, all from online boutiques and trendy cafes in Los Angeles. My stomach clenched. Chloe lived in LA. Then the charges escalated, growing bolder, more audacious. A designer handbag, a weekend stay at a luxury resort in Malibu, even a down payment on a sleek, ridiculously expensive electric scooter. Each item she listed felt like a personal insult, a deliberate act of defiance. The total amount was staggering, a 5-figure sum that represented months of my hard-earned savings, my emergency fund, my carefully planned future. My mind raced, trying to find any other explanation, any other culprit. But the truth was undeniable, glaringly obvious in its cruelty. There was only one person who had access to my credit card information, only one person who knew my spending habits well enough to mimic them, to fly under my radar for weeks. Chloe, my own sister. The resentment I'd harbored for years, carefully compartmentalized and suppressed, erupted like a volcano, spewing hot lava of anger and hurt. The symphony of my life had just been violently interrupted by a discordant, screeching crescendo. I stared at my reflection in the darkened window of my apartment, my face pale and drawn. The city lights twinkled below, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. This wasn't just about the money, though that was a significant blow. This was about the blatant disregard for my trust, the casual cruelty of her actions. It was a complete and utter betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. I had always been there for her, always picked up the pieces, always forgiven. But this time, something fundamental had shifted. The well of my patience had run dry, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. A plan began to form in my mind, a complicated, multi-layered scheme that would not only recoup my losses, but also teach Chloe a lesson she would never forget. It wouldn't be quick, and it wouldn't be easy. But the thought of her facing the consequences of her actions, of finally understanding the pain she had inflicted, filled me with a grim satisfaction. I would no longer be the responsible sister, the forgiving older sibling. I would be the architect of her comeuppance. The game had changed, and I was ready to play. The simmering resentment had finally boiled over, transforming into a burning desire for justice, a quiet obsession that would consume me until I saw it through. The email from my bank had been the final, undeniable proof, the cold hard facts that stripped away any lingering hope of a simple mistake. It detailed transaction after transaction, each one a fresh stab to my carefully constructed financial security. There were lavish spa treatments, designer clothing purchases, expensive restaurant tabs, and even a weekend getaway to a luxury resort in Malibu, all charged to my primary credit card. My mind raced, trying to reconcile these extravagant expenditures with my own life. I hadn't set foot in a spa in months. My wardrobe consisted mostly of sensible work attire, and a weekend in Malibu was a distant fantasy, not a recent reality. The sheer audacity, the brazen disregard for my trust, was what truly ignited the fire within me. My initial shock quickly morphed into a furious determination. I wasn't just angry. I was incandescent with rage. This wasn't some minor transgression, some forgotten loan. This was a calculated, prolonged act of financial exploitation, a systematic draining of my resources under the guise of sisterly affection. I pulled up my banking app, scrolling through the charges, a sick feeling twisting in my stomach with each new revelation. The numbers blurred, but the total stood out in stark, terrifying clarity. It was a substantial sum, enough to derail my carefully planned investments, enough to jeopardize the down payment I was saving for a small condo, enough to make me question everything I thought I knew about Chloe. A cold, analytical part of my brain took over, pushing aside the raw emotion. I needed to gather evidence, to build an airtight case. I downloaded every statement, highlighted every suspicious transaction, and cross-referenced dates and locations. It felt like I was preparing for a court case, not confronting my own sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. I, the responsible one, was meticulously documenting the irresponsibility of my own flesh and blood. Each click of the mouse, each highlighted line item, solidified my resolve. I wasn't just seeking repayment, I was seeking accountability. I remembered a conversation with Chloe just a few weeks prior. She had mentioned wanting to treat herself to a much-needed break, hinting at financial struggles but never outright asking for help. I had offered to lend her some money, as I always did, but she had brushed it off, saying she had things handled. A wave of nausea washed over me as the pieces clicked into place. She hadn't handled things. She had simply decided to handle my things. The memory of her dismissive wave, her casual smile, now felt like a cruel taunt, a deliberate deception designed to keep me in the dark. The burning desire for justice, the quiet obsession that had started to consume me, intensified with each piece of evidence I unearthed. I found myself replaying past interactions, searching for clues I had missed, subtle tells that might have hinted at her true intentions. Her overly enthusiastic praise for my new apartment, her sudden interest in my career advancements, her seemingly innocent questions about my financial stability, all of it now felt tainted, calculated. It was as if she had been casing the joint, assessing the best way to exploit my generosity. One evening, while poring over the statements, I noticed a recurring charge from a boutique in Beverly Hills. It was a place Chloe had always dreamed of shopping, a store far beyond her usual budget, and certainly beyond mine. A memory surfaced. Chloe had posted a picture on Instagram a few weeks ago, posing in a stunning emerald green dress. The caption read, "Treating myself. #blessed #new beginnings." The dress, I now realized with a sickening lurch, looked suspiciously like one I had seen advertised by that very boutique. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Not only had she stolen from me, but she was flaunting her ill-gotten gains on social media. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest. My hands trembled as I zoomed in on the picture, confirming my suspicions. The dress, the background, the timing, it all aligned perfectly with the charges on my statement. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about a profound breach of trust, a complete disregard for our sisterly bond. The resentment I had felt for years, the quiet frustration with her endless dramas, now coalesced into a singular, unwavering resolve. Chloe had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The emotional arc of resentment had fully blossomed into a crushing sense of betrayal. The thought of confronting her, of seeing the guilt or, worse, the feigned innocence in her eyes filled me with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. I knew I couldn't let this slide, not this time. This wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about drawing a definitive boundary that Chloe had so carelessly obliterated. The game had indeed changed, and I was no longer a passive participant. I was the architect of her comeuppance, and I would see it through. The notification from the bank wasn't just a red flag, it was a blaring siren, confirming my worst fears. My primary credit card, the one I used for everything, had been maxed out. Not by some anonymous hacker, but by Chloe. The realization solidified into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. This wasn't a mistake, a forgotten bill, or a minor oversight. This was a deliberate, calculated act, and it felt like a direct assault on my carefully constructed life. I stared at the screen, the glowing digits mocking me. Over $20,000, gone. Spent on what, I wondered? My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of my carefree sister with this stark betrayal. Was it another one of her ill-fated business ventures? A sudden, inexplicable shopping spree? The details were hazy, but the impact was brutally clear. My financial security, something I'd worked tirelessly to build, felt like it was crumbling around me. A wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. All those years of bailing her out, of sacrificing my own comfort for her fleeting whims, flashed before my eyes. Every late-night call, every desperate plea, every promise that this time would be different. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed facade to exploit my generosity. My love for Chloe, once a foundational pillar of my life, now felt like a gaping wound. I knew, in that moment, that I couldn't just brush this off. This wasn't another parking ticket, another forgotten rent payment. This was a violation, a deep cut that went beyond mere finances. It was a breach of trust so profound that it threatened to redefine our entire relationship. The responsible, pragmatic part of me screamed for immediate action, for confrontation, for a swift resolution. But a darker, more primitive instinct began to stir. I closed my laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting in my wide, disbelieving eyes. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, suddenly felt suffocating. I paced the living room, the city lights twinkling outside my window, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. The memory of Chloe's nonchalant attitude, her casual dismissals of my concerns, fueled the fire. She always believed she could charm her way out of anything, that her big sister would always be there to pick up the pieces. This time, however, the pieces were shattered beyond repair. A plan began to form, not a desperate emotional outburst, but something colder, more precise. I wouldn't confront her immediately. That would be too easy, too predictable. Chloe thrived on drama, on turning every argument into a spectacle where she was the misunderstood victim. No, this required a different approach, one that would hit her where it hurt most, one that would force her to confront the true cost of her actions. I started by methodically gathering evidence. Every suspicious charge, every overdraft notification, every email from the bank. I printed them out, meticulously highlighting each transaction, creating a damning dossier of her financial recklessness. It was a painstaking process, each line item a fresh stab of betrayal, but I pushed through it, fueled by a simmering resolve. This wasn't just about reclaiming my money. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind, my sense of justice. The next step involved a subtle but significant shift in my own behavior. I stopped answering her calls immediately. I let them go to voicemail, listening to her increasingly frantic messages with a chilling detachment. She started with casual check-ins, then moved to more urgent pleas for a quick chat, and finally, to thinly veiled demands for attention. The shift was almost imperceptible to her, but to me, it was a crucial part of the strategy. I was slowly, deliberately, pulling back, creating a void that she would inevitably try to fill. I also began to monitor her social media more closely. It was a habit I'd mostly abandoned, tired of her curated portrayals of a glamorous, carefree life. But now, every post, every story, every shared laugh with friends felt like a personal affront. She was living large, seemingly without a care in the world, while I was left to clean up her financial mess. The resentment festered, transforming into a steely determination. One evening, as I scrolled through her latest Instagram story, a lavish dinner party with friends, complete with expensive champagne and designer outfits, a dark satisfaction settled over me. She was so oblivious, so wrapped up in her own world of superficial pleasures. She had no idea the storm that was brewing, the meticulous plan I was orchestrating. The thought brought a strange sense of calm amidst the turmoil. I knew this wouldn't be easy. Confronting Chloe had always been like trying to nail jelly to a wall. She was a master of deflection, of emotional manipulation, of turning the tables until I was the one apologizing. But this time, I was prepared. I had the evidence, the resolve, and a plan that was as cold and calculated as her betrayal. The game had indeed changed, and I was no longer a passive participant. I was the architect of her comeuppance, and I would see it through. Every day that passed, every piece of evidence I collected, every unanswered call tightened the noose. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a potent mix of dread and exhilaration. I was ready. My sister Chloe, oblivious to the storm gathering around her, continued her charade. She called me occasionally, her voice chirpy, asking how I was, if I was still working too hard, if I'd finally taken a vacation. Each question was a fresh stab, a reminder of the elaborate web of deceit she was weaving. I played along, my voice calm, feigning ignorance, all while a cold resolve hardened within me. I offered vague answers, always steering the conversation away from anything that might reveal my true intentions. The irony was palpable. She thought she was manipulating me, but I was the one pulling the strings now, orchestrating her downfall with meticulous precision. The day I finally confronted her was a Tuesday, a day etched into my memory with the clarity of a nightmare. I had spent weeks meticulously gathering every shred of evidence, the bank statements, the security camera footage from the ATM where she'd made the cash advances, even the flight itineraries for the luxurious trip to Miami she'd taken with her new boyfriend, all paid for with my money. I had printed everything, organized it into a neat, damning file, each page a testament to her betrayal. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, but my hands were steady, my resolve unwavering. I had invited her over for what I told her was a sisterly brunch, a tradition we used to share before her actions poisoned our relationship. She arrived, all smiles and designer sunglasses, completely unaware of the ambush awaiting her. "Hey sis!" she chirped, her eyes scanning my apartment for any new additions she might covet. "Smells delicious in here." "What did you make?" I forced a smile, a brittle facade over the churning rage beneath. "Just some quiche and mimosas." "Come in, Chloe." We sat at my dining table, the morning sun streaming through the window, illuminating the tension that hung heavy in the air. I poured her a mimosa, watching her carefully as she took a sip, her eyes still sparkling with carefree innocence. This was it, the moment I had been planning, rehearsing, and dreading. "So, Chloe," I began, my voice surprisingly even, "I have something I need to talk to you about." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, What's up? Everything okay? I pushed the thick file across the table towards her, the thud of it against the wood echoing in the sudden silence. I think you know exactly what's up. She glanced at the file, then back at me, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. What's this, Sarah? Some new marketing strategy you're working on? She tried to laugh, but it came out as a nervous squeak. Open it, I commanded, my voice devoid of warmth. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached for the file. As she flipped through the pages, her face drained of color, the cheerful facade crumbling away to reveal a stark, terrified realization. Her eyes darted from the bank statements to the ATM photos, then to the flight details, each document a nail in her coffin. The mimosas sat untouched, the quiche forgotten, the silence stretched, thick and suffocating, punctuated only by the rustle of papers as she frantically scanned the evidence of her deceit. Sarah, I can explain, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper, her hands trembling as she clutched the incriminating documents. Can you? I challenged, my voice rising, the carefully constructed calm finally cracking. Can you explain why there are over $20,000 of charges on my credit card that aren't mine? Can you explain why you were withdrawing cash from ATMs in Miami with my card? Can you explain why you thought it was okay to steal from your own sister? Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of remorse, not yet. They were tears of being caught, tears of desperation. I was going through a tough time, Sarah. You know how it is. My business wasn't doing well, and Mark, he really wanted to go to Miami. I was going to pay you back, I swear. A tough time? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. A tough time doesn't excuse theft, Chloe. A tough time doesn't give you permission to betray the one person who has always been there for you. My voice was shaking now, the raw emotion I had suppressed for weeks finally breaking through. You didn't just take my money, Chloe. You took my trust. You shattered it into a million pieces. She tried to reach for my hand, but I recoiled, pulling it away as if her touch would burn me. Please, Sarah, don't do this. We're sisters. We can fix this. Fix this? I echoed, the words dripping with sarcasm. There's nothing to fix, Chloe. You made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. I stood up, walking to the window, my back to her. The city outside, usually a source of comfort, now seemed indifferent to the wreckage of my family. I've decided to press charges. A gasp escaped her lips. What? No, Sarah, you can't. Think about Mom and Dad. Think about our family. You should have thought about them before you decided to become a thief, I retorted, turning to face her, my eyes cold and unyielding. I've been covering for you, bailing you out, cleaning up your messes for years, Chloe. But this is different. This is a crime. Her face was a mask of horror and disbelief. You wouldn't. You're bluffing. I walked back to the table, picking up a single document, a printout of the email from my bank confirming the fraud investigation was underway. Do I look like I'm bluffing, Chloe? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. This is real, and it's happening. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with years of resentment finally boiling over. The confrontation I had envisioned so many times was playing out, even more devastating than I had imagined. Yet, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The path ahead was clear, painful as it might be. The silence that followed my declaration was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Chloe's face, usually so expressive, was a mask of disbelief, then a flicker of fear. She tried to speak, but no words came out, only a choked gasp. I watched her, my heart a stone in my chest, refusing to soften. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about finally drawing a line in the sand that she couldn't cross. This was about self-preservation. You have 2 days, Chloe, I stated, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. 2 days to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. The locks will be changed on Friday morning. Her eyes widened, a fresh wave of tears welling up, but I didn't flinch. I had seen those tears before, too many times. They were her most potent weapon, designed to disarm and manipulate. Not this time. My resolve was unshakable. I had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment, rehearsing every word, fortifying myself against the inevitable emotional onslaught. "Sarah, please," she finally managed, her voice cracking. "You can't be serious. Where will I go?" "I have nowhere." "That, Chloe, is no longer my problem," I replied, turning away to face the window, the glittering lights of the city a stark contrast to the darkness consuming our relationship. "It should have been your problem weeks ago, when you decided to use my credit card as your personal ATM, when you decided to lie to me again, when you decided that my trust, my hard work, and my financial stability were yours for the taking." She started to sob then, a raw, guttural sound that once would have instantly melted my defenses. But the well of my empathy for her had run dry. It was a barren landscape, scorched by years of her selfishness and my misguided attempts to fix her. I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a scene unfold in a movie rather than living it. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she wailed, her voice thick with tears. "I swear, I'll pay you back. I'll get a job, I'll do anything, just please don't do this." "Don't kick me out." I turned back to her, my expression grim. "You've said that before, Chloe. Every single time. And every single time, you've failed to follow through. This isn't about the money anymore. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. It's about me finally choosing myself over your chaos." The words hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken frustrations. She stared at me, her face blotchy and red, and for a fleeting moment I saw a flicker of genuine understanding, a dawning realization of the magnitude of her actions. It was quickly replaced by anger, though, the familiar shift from victim to aggressor. "So, this is it then?" she spat, her voice hardening. "You're just going to throw me out on the street? After everything? After all the times I was there for you? When, Chloe?" I challenged, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "When were you there for me? When I was studying for finals while you were out partying? When I was working 2 jobs to pay for college while you were living off mom and dad? When I was building my career, meticulously saving, while you were blowing through every penny you ever got your hands on? Tell me, when exactly did you ever put my needs before your own?" Her mouth opened and closed, no retort ready. The truth, stark and undeniable, hung between us. There was no defense, no clever manipulation she could employ to twist this narrative. I had finally laid bare the uncomfortable reality of our dynamic. "I had planned a surprise vacation for us, Chloe," I continued, my voice dropping to a low, almost mournful tone. "A trip to Italy. Rome, Florence, Venice. Everything booked, all paid for. A chance for us to reconnect, to finally be sisters again, without the weight of your latest crisis hanging over us. That's what I was saving for. That's what you stole." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes widened again, this time not with fear, but with a profound, almost childlike devastation. The anger drained from her face, replaced by a look of abject horror. The idea of a lavish European vacation, something she craved but could never achieve on her own, snatched away by her own destructive actions, was a punishment far more potent than any lecture or eviction notice. She swayed slightly, gripping the back of a chair for support. "Italy?" she whispered, the word barely audible. You were going to take me to Italy?" "Yes," I confirmed, my voice devoid of emotion. "But not anymore. That money, every single cent, is now going towards paying off the debt you incurred. And the trip, it's gone. Just like my trust. Just like our relationship. Unless you finally decide to change." The weight of my words settled on her, crushing her. The tears started again, but this time they were different. These were tears of genuine regret, of a profound realization of what she had lost. It was a bittersweet victory. The emotional climax of our years-long struggle had arrived, and while I had won, the cost was immense. My sister, broken and exposed, stood before me, and the path to any kind of future for us, even a distant, uncertain one, felt impossibly steep. The closure I sought was tinged with a deep sadness, a mourning for the sister I once had, and the sister she could have been. The sting of that bittersweet victory lingered, a constant thrum beneath my skin. Seeing Chloe broken, her carefully constructed facade crumbling, offered a fleeting satisfaction, but it was quickly overshadowed by a profound emptiness. We stood in the ruins of our relationship, the echoes of my accusations still hanging heavy in the air. I had won the battle, but the war for a semblance of family, felt irrevocably lost. The silence that followed my revelation was deafening, punctuated only by Chloe's ragged breaths and the frantic beat of my own heart. I watched her, truly watched her, for the first time in years. The girl who used to braid my hair and whisper secrets under the covers was gone, replaced by a stranger whose eyes held a flicker of something I hadn't seen before, genuine fear. It wasn't the fear of getting caught, not anymore. This was the fear of losing everything, of facing the consequences of a lifetime of reckless choices. A part of me, the part that still remembered our childhood, ached for her. But the larger part, the part that had been repeatedly betrayed, remained resolute. "What do you want from me, Sarah?" Her voice was barely a whisper, raw and hoarse. I took a slow, deliberate breath, steadying myself. This was the moment, the true climax of everything. "I want you to understand, Chloe. I want you to truly understand the depth of what you've done, not just to my bank account, but to me, to us." My gaze swept over the luxurious ill-gotten gains scattered around her apartment. "This isn't just about money. It's about trust, about respect, about the years I spent trying to help you, only for you to spit on every single effort." Her eyes darted away, unable to meet mine. A fresh wave of anger, cold and sharp, washed over me. Even now she couldn't face it. "I'm not asking for an apology," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I'm asking for accountability. For you to finally, for once in your life, take responsibility for your actions." She flinched, a visible tremor running through her. I can pay you back, Sarah. I will. Just don't tell Mom and Dad, please." The desperation in her plea was palpable, a stark contrast to her usual brazen confidence. It was then I realized the true extent of her fear, not of me, but of their disappointment, of losing the comfortable safety net they had always provided. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Pay me back? With what, Chloe? More of my money? More of your empty promises?" I shook my head slowly, the weight of years of disappointment pressing down on me. "No. This isn't about repayment anymore. This is about a fundamental shift. You're going to face this head on. Every single consequence." Her head snapped up, a flicker of defiance returning to her eyes. "What are you talking about? I've already contacted the bank," I stated, watching her face drain of color. "I've filed a full report of fraud, and I'm pressing charges." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Her jaw dropped, her eyes widening in disbelief, then horror. You wouldn't," she stammered, her voice cracking. "You're my sister!" "And you're a thief, Chloe," I countered, my voice steady, unwavering. "You stole from me. You violated my trust in the most egregious way possible. And now, you're going to learn that actions have consequences. Real consequences. Not just the ones I've always shielded you from." Tears welled in her eyes, finally spilling over, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. It wasn't the crocodile tears I'd grown accustomed to. This felt different, raw, genuine. A part of me wanted to reach out to comfort her, but I steeled myself against the impulse. This was for her own good, a harsh lesson she desperately needed to learn. "The bank will investigate," I explained, my voice devoid of emotion, "and they'll pursue legal action. Your name will be on police reports, on court documents. This isn't something I can just sweep under the rug anymore, even if I wanted to." "You've crossed a line, Chloe, one that can't be uncrossed with a simple apology or a promise to do better." She collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands, her sobs echoing in the silence. The scene was painful to witness, a mirror reflecting years of my own frustration and heartache. But beneath the pain, there was a strange sense of liberation. The burden I had carried for so long, the weight of her irresponsibility, was finally being lifted. "This isn't about revenge, Chloe," I said, my voice softening slightly, though my resolve remained firm. "This is about justice. For me, yes, but also for you. This is your chance to finally hit rock bottom, to truly understand the damage you've caused, and to maybe, just maybe, start building something real, something honest, for yourself." I turned to leave, the silence broken only by her ragged breathing. As I reached the door, I paused, looking back at her one last time. The sister I knew, the one I loved, was buried somewhere beneath layers of deceit and self-destruction. This painful, brutal confrontation was the only way to unearth her. The closure I sought was tinged with a deep sadness, a mourning for the sister I once had, and the sister she could have been, but it was also tinged with hope, a fragile, nascent hope that from these ashes, something new, something better, might eventually rise. I closed the door softly behind me, leaving Chloe to face the wreckage she had created, and stepping out into a future that, for the first time in a long time, felt truly my own. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. My sister, Sarah, stood frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The glossy brochures for the Caribbean cruise lay scattered on the coffee table, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her expression. She had just realized the full extent of my plan, the precise moment my carefully constructed revenge was about to unfold. What are you talking about, Chloe?" Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with a tremor I hadn't heard in years. It was the sound of a cornered animal, and for a fleeting second, I almost felt a pang of something akin to pity. But then I remembered the months of financial struggle, the sleepless nights spent staring at credit card statements, the cold dread that had settled in my stomach every time I thought about my ruined credit score. The pity evaporated, replaced by a steely resolve. "You heard me, Sarah," I replied, my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "That cruise? The one you've been dreaming about since we were kids? The one you thought you were going on with your precious boyfriend, Mark?" I paused, letting my words hang in the air, twisting the knife just a little. "Well, you are going, just not with him, and not on my dime anymore." Her face contorted, a flush rising from her neck to her cheeks. "You wouldn't dare." "You can't." A slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. "Oh, but I can. And I have." I picked up one of the brochures, tracing the outline of a pristine beach with my finger. "Remember that little clause in our sisterly agreement about financial accountability? The one you scoffed at when I first suggested it?" Sarah's eyes darted to the legal document I had meticulously prepared months ago, now lying innocently on the table beside the brochures. It was a simple yet ironclad agreement, detailing the repayment plan for the money she had siphoned from my credit card. She had signed it without truly reading it, convinced I was just being overly dramatic. "Foolish girl. The fine print, Sarah," I continued, my voice gaining a touch more strength. "It states that if you default on even one payment, all outstanding balances become immediately due. And if you can't pay, well, then I get to choose the form of repayment." I watched her closely, savoring the moment. "And my choice? Your half of the inheritance, plus a little something extra for my troubles. Enough to cover that cruise, first class, for me and Mom." The color drained from her face, leaving it ashen. "The inheritance? You wouldn't. That's our parents' legacy." "It was," I corrected, my voice hard. "Before you decided to treat my finances like your personal ATM. You gambled with my future, Sarah. You took advantage of my trust, and you nearly ruined me. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about consequences." Tears welled in her eyes, but they held no power over me now. "Please, Chloe, don't do this. I'll pay you back, I swear I'll find a way. I shook my head slowly. Too late for promises, Sarah. I've heard them all before. This cruise Mom and I are going. And while we're sipping pina coladas in the Caribbean, you can think about what you've done. Think about the trust you shattered, the sister you betrayed. I stood up, the brochures still clutched in my hand. The tickets are non-transferable, by the way. And Mark? He's going to be very disappointed when he finds out he's not going on that dream vacation after all. I'm sure he'll understand why. As I walked out, leaving her alone in the quiet living room, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no triumphant roar, no fist-pumping victory. Instead, a quiet sense of closure settled over me. The resentment, the betrayal, the obsession. They had all culminated in this moment of justice. It was bittersweet knowing that the cost of this peace was the fractured relationship with my sister. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of her deception had finally lifted, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had reclaimed my life, one painful, necessary step at a time.